Hello, and welcome to the Talking Change podcast, a podcast by HoneyVic Productions. Talking Social Change believes in order to bring about a more just society, we must start with honest conversations with marginalized and ethical voices about important social topics. Talking Social Change seeks these conversations with artists, writers, researchers, journalists, experts, and thought leaders for their unique perspectives. The basis for honest conversation is mutual respect, factual history, and objective truth. Because in order to understand where we are now and where we need to go, you first need to understand where we have been. HoneyVic Productions is a nonprofit theater organization that seeks to amplify marginalized perspectives and works to transform dialogue into meaningful civic and social action. If you are inspired by what you hear on Talking Social Change today, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this podcast. And visit honeyvicproductions.org to join the mailing list and donate to support the mission. My name is Ben Wang, your host for today's Talking Social Change conversation. And joining me in conversation is Sal Vitale, an author and one of the founders of HoneyVic Productions and HoneyVic's executive director. Sal, thank you very much for talking with me.
Thank you, Ben. I'm excited about this. Let's go.
Looking forward to a great conversation. Sal, you are one of the founders of HoneyVic Productions. Please tell me about what co-founding HoneyVic has meant for you and what you have learned from this experience.
Absolutely, Ben. Quite honestly, I was not an activist in any of these social change issues that we are dealing with today here at HoneyVic Productions. I was always a liberal thinker and always supported the ideas, but as I said, not an activist. I wasn't involved in the group that our late friend Hank Silvert organized to discuss these issues. I came to, I respected the issues, and I actually got involved with HoneyVic Productions as a support mechanism for my wife and co-founder, Wanda Hall. Wanda has been writing plays for years about social change and about social issues. And one night we were having dinner after I was retired and getting kind of bored with being retired. And I said to Wanda, we should put on some of your plays. And that was how HoneyVic Productions got started. Now, since then, I've gotten deeply involved in the production of all of the plays of HoneyVic Productions and in development of some of the ancillary projects that we've been working on as well. And I've really come to appreciate the need for significant social change in our society. And it's become an important part of my life and an important part of our marriage that and our partnership that Wanda and I have.
Wow, that's really good to hear. And perfect segue into my next question, which is one of the ancillary topics or ancillary projects that you are working on at HoneyVic Productions, especially on the topic of social change. You're also an author, and you have already written and published 2 books. And I think that both of those books touch upon many social topics that we're grappling with today. So if you don't mind, I'd like to transition our conversation a little bit from the core project of HoneyVic into some of your writing, which of course also touches on many of the social topics that we're interested in discussing ourselves, and also that HoneyVic touches on as well.
Absolutely, Ben. Be very happy to discuss them, and you're absolutely right. They do touch on some important social change issues.
Right, exactly. So the first book that you wrote was called The Twilight's Last Gleaming. It was published in 2021. For the folks who haven't had a chance to read it yet, can you please tell us a little bit about the story of of your book?
Sure, sure. I'll focus on the approach on the story. It really is a story told in three different parts. Um, the first part and the part that kind of drives the story is actually on a spaceship. Uh, it's a group of individuals, mostly scientists and engineers, traveling on a spaceship um, from which they have used to escape from a planet, a far, far away planet that was ruled by an autocratic ruler who was destroying the society there. And these folks decided to escape the planet. And it's a story about what happens on that plane, on that spaceship during decades of travel. The second part of the story is about the planet and the things that were happening on the planet that made those group of individuals want to escape. It was a planet, as I said, ruled by an autocratic ruler uh, who ruled with hatred and violence and was there, just solely to increase his power and his wealth. Um, and the third part of the story is the story of those individuals who escaped from the planet and how they managed to actually escape and get away from that society.
In your in your book, I was fortunate enough to have a chance to read it, and it does. While it is a certainly a science fiction story, it takes place in the distant future for sure. There are a lot of themes that I can kind of glean from what we are experiencing here in our present days. When you were writing this book, you were writing it back in 2019 and 2020. Correct me if I'm correct about that.
Actually, Ben, I started writing it in 2017.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
when I was recovering from a stem cell transplant
Oh,
that kept me confined to the house for almost 6 months. Um, and uh, I was paying a lot of attention to what was going on in the world in 2017
sure, sure.
and reading and watching too much science fiction. So it was a combination of commentary on what was happening in 2017 in the
Oh, okay.
world and and uh, and including, my visions of what I remember from all the Star Trek and Star Wars and other science fiction that I was following at the time.
Fair to say you're kind of a science fiction fan.
Yes, I'm very much a science fiction fan.
So, what was happening in 2017, 2018, maybe even 2019 around you that kind of influenced your writing of this story or gave you ideas or things that you wanted to include in your story here?
Well, in 2017, that was certainly uh, the the depth of the first Trump administration,
Mhm.
and the idea of and which is nothing like what's going on today, which is far worse. But at the time, the idea of an autocratic uh, government here in the U.S. was something that we all feared. Didn't happen back then, but it was certainly something that we were very fearful of. And that, for me, um, uh, designed the part of the story that was based on the planet.
Mhm.
Um, and it really drove that whole part of the story. Um, the parts of escaping from the planet and on the spaceship were more driven by the science fiction aspects um, of my interests at the time.
I the story, as you mentioned, your book kind of has three storylines, even though they're kind of interwoven within each other. And however, when I was reading the book, it was very apparent to me that even though in those three storylines, there was a common theme of how hate and lies and hate really are able to destroy a group, a community, even a world, and which allows in your story this autocrat, this tyrant to come to power and take control, right? So can you expand a little bit more on those themes of how hate and lies can destroy a society or a cohesion of group?
Well, you're absolutely right, Ben. You know, the story, um, the underlying themes of the story was just that, you know, how hate and lies can destroy a society. You know, I wish I was more uh, eloquent about how I told that part of the story. Um, but it was so critical to what was happening in the world back then, what was happening here in the United States, um, about hate and lies and the impact it was having on our society. And today, um, it is far, far worse than it ever was in 2017, 2018, 2019. Um, and it has put us in a position in here in the United States and in the world that the hate and the lies have dramatically changed the way we all act with each other, the way we react to things, and it is going to take a Herculean effort to undo all the damage that has been done by the hate and the lies.
Can you expand on that a little bit more? Why do you feel that because as you mentioned, you're writing this book back in 2017 and 2018, but why do you feel that the hate and the lies today are far worse than when you started writing the book
Well,
eight years ago?
what's happened, Ben, is that the hate and lies, particularly the lies, I think is as much as even more than the hate, but both have created a schism in our society, um, that you're either for or against. Uh, and it's gotten to a point where the people who are for can't seem to talk to the people who are against, and the people who are against can't seem to talk to the people who are for. And we have lost our ability to connect to each other, to compromise, to talk, compromise, to get along. And it really is very disturbing, you know, how that has happened. And it's going to take, as I said, you know, a Herculean effort. It's going to take someone who is a healer to be able to pull our society back together to the point where we can disagree. We can disagree in a healthy manner, but we have to be able to talk to each other. We have to be able to disagree in a healthy manner and to compromise to be able to move forward.
I couldn't agree with you more, absolutely. And unfortunately, that seems like a very tough battle these days to have to engage in. I mean, in order for your book lays out a very dystopian future, a very dystopian perspective, and that's certainly something we want to avoid. What are some steps that average people regular people like you and I can take within our community, within our circle of friends and family, that we can do to move society into avoiding the dystopian scenario in your stories, in your book.
And I truly wish I was smart enough to be able to come up with good solutions for this. But I would think that at a minimum, uh, hate and lies need to be called out, and they need to be
Mm.
called out in a civilized way that doesn't lead to more hatred being developed. At the simplest level, Ben, I would say we all need to to remember what we learned in kindergarten about respect for others, about getting along, about playing nice with each other. Um, if we could only remember those lessons from kindergarten, um, we would be in a far better place today.
Well, that's definitely certainly something we're trying to do here at Talking Social Change with our podcast here, with our interviews here. We're trying to talk to influential people or people with unique perspectives, and starting with honest conversations and mutual respect. So certainly that's something we are trying to do ourselves here. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask you about your next book. This one was published more recently. It was called Project Franklin. This was published in 2024. Without giving too much away of the book, please, if you don't mind telling us a little bit about the story itself and for the folks who haven't had a chance to read it.
Sure. The theme of this story is about the impact of excessive greed and unchecked technology. It's about a young man who finds himself in a bar, um, and all he has keys, he has a wallet, he has some money. Uh, but he doesn't have any idea who he is and how he wound up in that bar. Um, and it starts off by him hearing a story on TV about what he thinks is the passing of the baseball star Willie Mays. Uh, it's a funny start to a story, but it was actually something that happened to me in a bar one night. And I thought I heard that Willie Mays had passed. It turned out he didn't. Turned out it was a TV salesperson named Billy Mays who passed away, unfortunately. Um, but in his desperation to find out, Willie Mays was the first thing that this guy remembered um, as something from his past. And from there, he seeks to find out who he is. And that's what the story is all about, his search to learn for who he is.
That's really interesting that you took the perspective of a person who basically has amnesia about his past. He's able to function. He's able to operate his uh, things that he needs to do in his life. Eating, he still remembers how to eat and cook and all of those things, right? He remembers his home more or less, but he doesn't remember anything of his past. He almost has amnesia about his past, right? And
Right.
going about his life as best he can, and he's trying to put the pieces together, right? But there's always this nagging sense under him that something is not correct, something is not right. Is
Exactly right, Ben.
that a fair statement?
Yes, that very fair statement. He um, he learns things day by day, um, doesn't forget anything that he's learned, but doesn't remember anything from before the time he showed up in that bar. Um, and it's really a strange situation that he's in, that he has this fabulous memory of everything that happened from the time he showed up in the bar until today, and go, but nothing before then. And I think it's really interesting how he goes about finding out who he is and why his memory is that way.
Were you trying to make any kind of analogies to our present day society? Because the story does take more or less take place in our present time period, right? So were you trying to make any kind of analogies using this character, Franklin, to our current society here today?
A little bit without revealing too much of the story,
Of course.
is that there's a cabal of rich um, individuals who are greedily trying to expand their riches, and they're using Franklin as a pawn to make that happen. Um, how they use him would be too much to tell you
Okay. Right.
to tell our
That gave too
listeners.
much away.
It would reveal too much about the story.
Right.
But that's what's happening, and that, quite frankly, is what's happening in our society today. The rich are doing what they can to get richer.
Mm.
You know, the excessive greed in the story mirrors the excessive greed in our society today. How many homes, how many yachts, how many fancy cars do you need to be satisfied? It seems that with some people, it's never enough, which is partly why I have the quote that opens the book that says, um, "I have something I can't remember it exactly, but I have something that he will never have, enough." I forget who made that quote, but yeah, at some point you have to say, "I have enough."
I mean, I think that's a great point. That's a great insight. But unfortunately, I think our society, the society that we are so accustomed to and that we've been brought up in, it's all about it's never enough. You always need to have more, right? Our
Right.
whole consumerism society, the way that our economy is built on just incessant consumerism and constantly getting more and more and more, and it's never, never, ever enough, right? I think I agree with your message, but it goes against the grain of how most of us are brought up, or many of us are brought up here.
That's correct. That is correct, Ben. But we need to we need to learn that there should be some kind of limits uh, that we have. Um, because the greedier that people get means less for people who um, can't even feed themselves and their families. We have to find a better balance in society today.
I agree. I agree. How do you think we can go about getting a better balance?
Ben,
That's a question.
this one is even harder for me to answer. That as I said earlier, I'm really not smart enough to figure some of these things out. But I think that some of the things that we hear from more progressive um, politicians today are some things that we should look to explore and implement. I think higher taxes on the rich. Um, we should go back to the kind of taxation we had in the 50s and 60s when you could truly say that it was possible to rise up in society. Back then, we had um, taxes where the um, progressive tax system where um, the highest earners were for the higher portion of their income was taxed at a very high percentage, like 70, 80%. And all of those taxes went away in the days of Ronald Reagan and moving forward. So taxes like that are necessary. Um, a focus on socially relevant programs um, that have been dismantled in the last couple of years in the second Trump administration. But we need to go back to the programs that feed the poor, that provide incentives um, for individuals to be able to um, uh, pick themselves up um, with some help from society to move forward. Um, I think that we need to find ways to solve our healthcare crisis
Mm.
where the people that are succeeding in healthcare are the insurance companies and the medical systems, and not the individuals who need the help from the healthcare system. There are too many people taking a piece of the pie that is totally unnecessary to happen. So some things like that, Ben, are some of the things that I think we need to do as a society.
I agree. I agree. Those are all great ideas and necessary. Uh, I thought both of your books were great reads, super entertaining, also very thought provoking, as our conversation has already brought out some of those points already. Is there anything in either Project Franklin or Twilight's Last Gleaming that we didn't get a chance to talk about that you would like to mention?
Hmm. I don't think so, Ben. I think that, the the key things were that, how hate and lies can destroy a society, and how greed and I didn't quite we didn't really talk too much about unchecked technology
Yeah.
that comes out in Project Franklin, but um, talking about that will reveal too much of the plot of the book, I think. But certainly having some better checks on technology and what can happen um, is extremely important. I mean, I was not thinking about AI when I wrote the book, but it is a little bit of a warning about what can happen with AI. And so it is something that I think folks should be aware of.
I certainly think that unchecked technology is a very, very relevant topic for our current day and age, especially now with all the new technologies, artificial intelligence becoming more prevalent in our society, as well as all the other technologies that we are now almost completely reliant on,
Yes, yes.
right?
But at the same time, we it's like today um, our government is I believe focusing on technologies on the wrong technologies. That we are allowing for an unchecked um, AI technology to flourish while we are killing technologies like wind and solar power. Um, Makes no sense to me.
True, that's true. And to be perfectly honest, those are kind of contradictory because wind and solar, those technologies provide additional power,
Right.
So if we want to increase our technology basis, we're going to need the energy anyway. So, but
Correct.
that's also very contradictory. So where can folks pick up Project Franklin and the Twilight's Last Gleaming?
Well, typically you can pick them up at any place you typically get books, but I would recommend that people go to HoneyVicProductions.org, where there is a very clearly identified Sal Vitale author um, option, and where you can read more about the books and get the links you need to purchase either a hard copy or a computer readable version of the books. So HoneyVicProductions.org.
Are you working on any of the books that we should be looking forward to?
Well, I've got two books. One it's maybe about a third done. One that is just an idea that I'm working on. One is the one that's about a third done, which frankly I haven't been as focused on lately. It's about um, uh, guns in America and the killing, unnecessary killing and deaths that happen because of our gun policies in America. And the second book is a truly dystopian story about what happens if we can't heal the rift that we have today and our society here in the United States really becomes two very separate and dangerous worlds of the red country and the blue country.
Wow. Both of them sound very interesting. I look forward to when they come out. I look forward to reading them, and hopefully we'll get a chance to chat about them as well
Yes.
once I've had a chance to read them.
Well, I have to write them first.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to this. So going back to HoneyVic Productions, as you just mentioned, what does HoneyVic Productions have planned in the coming months that you want the audience or the listeners to know about?
Well, we have a play. Well, it's a festival of one-act plays called Acts of Breaking Silence that is going live on stage in about 4 weeks at the American Theater of Actors in New York City on West 54th Street in New York City. We are in rehearsal now for that, and we're very excited about that production.
What are the dates of the festival?
The dates of the festival are July 16th to the 19th of this year. So the last show is actually 1 month from today.
Oh, great. Well, Sal, thank you very much for talking with me today, and we thank you for joining us on this Talking Social Change conversation. If you were inspired by what you heard today, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the Talking Social Change podcast. And please visit honeyvicproductions.org to get a copy of Project Franklin and The Twilight's Last Gleaming, and also to join the HoneyVic mailing list. Donate to support the HoneyVic Productions cause and projects, and also please get tickets to Acts of Breaking Silence Festival from July 16th to the 19th. Is that right?
That's correct.
Great. And you can also follow the Talking Social Change podcast and HoneyVic Productions on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. The links are in the description. Thank you again for listening, and thank you, Sal, for this great conversation.
Thank you, Ben.